What are the warning signs of suicide? How do educators and parents build safe and trusting relationships to sustain children through difficult moments in their lives? Join us as we talk about this sensitive and important topic coming up next in the chat room. Welcome to the chat room. I'm Frank O'Gara, your host today. Suicide is a serious public health problem that can have lasting harmful effects on individuals, families, schools, and communities. While its causes are complex and determined by multiple factors, the goal of suicide prevention is simple: reduce factors that increase risk and increase factors that promote resilience. With me in the studio to discuss suicide prevention and awareness in DoDEA are two educators from our headquarters Student Support Services branch, Ms. Aniko Maher and Ms. Jasmine McLeod. Welcome, Aniko and Jasmine.
Thank you.
I'm really glad to have you here. And you're both experienced practitioners. Aniko, in what field?
I am in school nursing, the ISS for the DoDEA schools.
Okay, and Jasmine?
School counseling, and I also have a background in psychology.
Okay. Suicide is a very, very difficult and sensitive topic, not only for people of all ages, but I think particularly when we talk about young people. I read a statistic recently that the CDC had put out, and they said that suicide was the leading cause of death in the United States. But they also said that among young people ages 15 to 24, it was the second leading cause of death. And that was, to me, very frightening and sobering. And so I thought it was really important for us to spend some time talking about suicide prevention in our DoDEA schools, identification, and certainly the responses that we take in our schools. So let me begin today by asking, why is it important for us as a school system to have an awareness of suicide and suicide prevention in DoDEA schools?
Okay, well, suicide and suicidal behaviors are not healthy. Emotional wellness and mental health is just as important as physical wellness for academic achievements among students. Awareness of the suicidal issues is the first step in taking action in suicidal prevention. In the past years, there has been an increase of mental health problems among pre-teens and adolescents.
And nationally, you mean, or in our
both?
Both.
Yes, and suicide is tragic, but it is often preventable. And we could provide you a lot more statistics of numbers of suicidal attempts and death by suicide, but I feel that just one death by suicide is one too many.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and to expand on that, Frank, you know, I think it's important to note, just off of your statistic alone, that this is not a youth issue, it's not a military issue, this is really a public health issue. And as Aniko mentioned, one life alone is just too many, and that's why this is important to talk about.
Well, let's talk about what the research says about the risk factors and about the warning signs. What can you tell me about those?
Well, current research, and this is always a growing field, delineates between risk factors and warning signs based off of time. So when you think about risk factors, the research suggests that logical predictors for evaluating potential suicidal ideation is long-term, whereas warning signs are a clear indication of imminent danger. So to see this in practice, for example, if you have a student, let's name him John. John is typically a well-adjusted student, performs well academically in school, and his teachers, his counselors, they start to notice that John just seems to be displaying a more anxious behavior. He seems a little bit stressed, and typically he's never had any behavioral issues before, but lately he's been sent to the principal's office for some risky behaviors. And his most recent incident was maybe a substance abuse on campus, which is completely out of character for him. And you're noticing this progression of those behaviors over, you know, 2-3 months. So those are your long-term risk factors that we're looking at. But then one day his English teacher comes to the counselor and she says, you know, I'm really concerned. She comes with John and says, I'm really concerned about John. He wrote this poem and describing how he wants to end his life, and it's very detailed. It describes a plan. It describes how he would go about doing it. And as the counselor's talking to John, he explains to her that he has means to complete that plan. And so naturally the counselor pulls the parent into her office, or his office, and the parent shares with her that, that he's been acting depressed lately. He's been pulling away from his family. He hasn't been coming down and spending time in common areas in the home as much as he used to. And things that he was passionate about, let's say it was football and video games, he's just not displaying interest in those things any longer. And so all of those factors are really depicting a picture that shows us that there's some imminent danger here for John, and we need to get him the help that he needs. So both are important, the risk factors and the warning signs. And fortunately, our mental health professionals in our schools are trained to identify and respond to both.
Now, if I'm a teacher, I want to just talk a little bit about something you said. If I'm a teacher and I'm not a trained mental health professional, how do I recognize some of those indicators that are there as actual signs of a potential you know, suicidal person that I ought to report and get further help for?
Mm-hmm.
Well, most people who feel suicidal, they do demonstrate the warning signs, and but not all people do. Some of the common warning signs are appearance of sadness, chronic long-term sadness, depression. In fact, the number one reason for suicide is untreated depression. Thinking about killing oneself, talking about it, making plans is another common sign. Withdrawing from family, friends, and normal activities, change in behavior, and drug and alcohol abuse. And these are signs that actually teachers are in a key position to recognize, because they actually spend more time with the kids than the students' parents or
Sure.
anybody else. I mean, the students spend more time at school than at home. So being aware of the common signs will certainly help to identify and then to know what to do once you recognize these signs.
Now, obviously, prevention is critical.
Absolutely.
Can we talk a little bit about prevention?
Yeah, in fact, we'd like to talk about prevention that works. I think one of the most important factors is increasing awareness, you know, what we're doing today. In the past, it's very difficult to talk about suicide. It's a scary topic. But the Department of Defense has done a fabulous job increasing awareness and encouraging our service members, their families, and those who provide services to our service members, encouraging them to have these discussions. Let's talk about what it looks like. Let's talk about what you can do to respond to a suicidal threat, and what type of services are available out there for those types of situations. So the first part is increasing that awareness. The second part is fostering resiliency. You know, when you talk about preventable factors, increasing a person's ability to cope is probably one of the most effective things we can do. And actually, the relationships that we have, we've talked about this a great deal, Aniko and I, and this kind of ties into DoDEA's campaign around the power of one. Their power of one says that one act, one question, one call can save a life. And so in our schools, we encourage our educators to have a relationship with every single student in that school. And that's very important, to have a trusting and safe relationship that you can go to, confide in, and know that that person, if they have sometimes it's just a gut feeling that says, you know, something here is just not right and I'm concerned about you. To have the strength, the courage to kind of cue that up and ask a few more questions. How are you doing? How are you feeling right now? And to get the right people involved, the experts in the field, if you do have a real concern, and say, you know, I think this person could really use someone to talk to, and notify the right people is very important.
Yeah, in all the literature I've seen resiliency listed as a critical piece here. What makes one student more resilient than another student?
Right. Well, you know, I've practiced my resiliency every day, actually. I start my mornings off with a little bit of a positive affirmation to make sure I frame my day in the right way. USD PNR actually defines resilience as the ability to withstand, recover, and grow in the face of stressors. And so it's the whole idea of total force fitness. So it's the ability to cope mentally, physically, emotionally, socially with obstacles. And all of us have obstacles throughout our lives. So it's that steady practice, you know, from students to adults, we all have challenges that we have to overcome. And resiliency is your ability to sustain through them, your ability to respond through them. And it's not a destination, it's a journey, you know. We're constantly growing and figuring out ways how to handle our emotions and our thoughts so that we can stay healthy.
And I think it requires every teacher to keep an eye on every one of the students that they come in contact with.
Right, and also with developing coping skills, which is will lead to resiliency. That's something that needs to be addressed by teachers in schools and also by parents at home to encourage those coping skills and practice them.
You know, an interesting thing about resiliency, each military branch has their own resiliency training program. And so when you have a service member who goes through the training, and then you have a student who's hopefully getting some resiliency training in school counseling programs, school psychology programs, teach students around character building, those kinds of things. It's beneficial to work with the training officials for our service members, because that way when that student and that service member comes into their home, they're speaking the same language, they're using the same terminology, so that they're able to really join together and build a stronger relationship around resiliency, and therefore you have a resilient home which spreads out into a resilient military community. So that partnership and collaboration is also very key.
And we're connected at the school level with those resources that we find in military communities? We
are. We do that purposefully.
So let me make this very practical. So I'm a teacher, and now I've listened to the warning signs, the risks, so what's the most appropriate response for me when I do have some concerns about an individual? What should I do?
I like to start with what you should not do. You should never dismiss a person as just trying to get attention or call it teen drama. You should never try to manage the problem on your own, and do not ever leave a person alone if they're in crisis. What you should do is stay with that student or walk that student to the school counselor, the school psychologist, the school nurse, and talk to them, because these professionals do have the advanced knowledge and know how to manage and how to assess the situation. They can take control of that situation and ensure that the student gets the medical referral and the help that they need. Always take suicide or warning signs seriously. I can't stress that enough.
Absolutely.
Now we know that schools can't do this alone, and there are resources out there, but how do we best partner with our military communities to foster this resiliency that we hope to see in our student body?
You know, our school administrators, our counselors, our psychologists, our mental health professionals do a fabulous job with partnering with mental health professionals within their installations, within their districts, because this is an important topic and they realize that. So building those relationships, even through from the administrators to the commanders, with medical facilities, with parents. You know, parents are key stakeholders in this work. You know, to again foster that resilient home. So we partner with everyone: Military One Source, behavioral health, our vendors such as INFLEC and school behavioral health. But something that you know we don't maybe think about as much, but that is very effective, especially for this age group, the preteens, adolescent age group, are the peer-to-peer supports. So what are we doing in our schools to leverage and empower our students to take some onus in this work, to encourage their peers to identify suicidal warning signs and educate each other on, of course, with the help of professionals, on how to respond. You know, make sure you're notifying the right people. What is the military crisis line number? Those types of things. I've seen that done in some of our schools, and it's a fabulous way to really foster a safe learning environment in our schools.
And if schools are interested in having those kinds of peer programs, do we have resources available that can help?
Absolutely. One that comes off the top of my head is our student-to-student program. We have a lot of different student leadership programs in our schools, but it's just a matter of identifying that as a goal for those groups and giving them some power and an opportunity to be a part of that discussion, again, to build that awareness.
Okay, I want to go back to a couple of things that you said because I think they're really important. And one is that you mentioned this power of one. Okay, can we talk about the power of one? What is it? What does it mean?
So the Power of One is a Department of Defense campaign. And the whole onus, again, is to build awareness amongst the entire DoD community and to encourage everyone to take ownership of identifying, you know, a concern, to asking questions, not being afraid, again, to broach that conversation, that topic, to verbally say, I'm concerned about you, and ask a couple of questions. And then to know how to act. Be familiar with the military crisis line. Be okay with getting that person the help that they need. Even our Defense Secretary, Ash Carter, you know, he's spoken about this since very early on, and he stresses the importance of us realizing that asking for help is not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength. So we really need to embrace that, and the Power of One campaign allows each of us to identify for ourselves how we do that.
We know that parents play a critical role here, and we've been talking about what we can do in school and what our school professionals can, but what about parents? What about the signs that they may see and the help that they may need to seek? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Well, in addition to the resources that are available, if there is signs of suicide and the parent has concern, they definitely need to contact their primary care provider, because it is their physician that will provide the care, the best care that is required, and will know how to approach the problem and where to refer, whether mental health care is needed. It's a medical issue, it's a medical concern. Just like if you have a broken arm, you go to your doctor or the emergency room. And it's the same here. If there's a child in crisis, your best action is to go to the emergency room. It is, and sadly there is stigma attached to mental health issues, and bringing the awareness and talking about this, we're also trying to reduce that stigma and approach it as a health concern.
Are we making progress on reducing that stigma?
Slowly,
Slowly.
hopefully, yes.
I've seen a lot of progress being made on that. You see, within a military community, it is talked about a lot
Yes.
more, and you have a lot of our leadership encouraging everybody to seek the help that they need.
That's a good thing.
That's a very good thing.
I mean, the risk is too great
It is.
to not to. Okay. How about where our viewers can go for more information on this subject?
Sure. Well, there's a plethora of resources. Perhaps the most important one is the Military Crisis Line. It's set up so that you can text, you can call in, you can notify someone of a concern that you have, or if you just need to talk, there's someone on the other end of that line to do that. So that number is 1-800-273-8255. DoD has a Defense Suicide Prevention Office. Each military branch has a prevention office as well. There are resiliency programs, and we are at DoDEA is actually in the process of providing those resources on our webpage so that we're sure all of our stakeholders have access of options for resources as well.
And our parents can always ask a school principal or a school nurse or a counselor for some
Absolutely.
assistance.
We encourage it.
Well, I really appreciate you coming in today to talk about this. It's a very sensitive, hard to talk about in some cases subject, but one that's really critical for our educators, for our students, and for our parents. And so we appreciate your time. You can find more information and more resources at the URLs listed on our website. And remember the power of one. Power of one can save a life. Thank you for joining us in this edition of The Chat Room.